There are so many people, specifically women, more specifically black women, who put off trips for months and years because they don't have anyone to go with. And I think for myself, I've gotten so much benefit from solo traveling. And I also recognize that there were a lot of things that I had to get over, whether it was a level of social conditioning, whether it was, safety concerns from myself and also people that love me, unfamiliarity with different parts of the world. There's just so much that goes into why someone may feel uncomfortable solo traveling, and I wanted to dismantle those just a little bit, and go through each limiting belief that I personally experience, how I was able to get over it, and then also some practical tips for you if you're someone who has been putting off that trip, so that this might make you feel a little bit more comfortable taking the leap, because I really do think that every woman should take at least one solo trip in her life. I think there are just a lot of benefits to it that we will get into, and that I've also talked about previously in other videos. So that's what we're going to talk about. If you don't know, my name is Alexis. I post here on YouTube every single day. Check my track record. Today is, I believe, day 32. And I talk all things travel, solo travel, career changes, career pivots, navigating big life changes, and just generally living life with a little more confidence and a little more boldness. So if that's something you're interested in, hop on this train early. It's only day 32, but my goal is to reach at least 100 days of daily posting here on YouTube. So, excuse me, let's get right into it. So I would say the first limiting factor or limiting belief for me was a level of discomfort being alone in general. Right now, I will say that there is a lot of social conditioning, I think, that goes into why people feel uncomfortable alone. It's like, a lot of us are taught that, like, oh, this person, if they're eating dinner alone or they're doing something alone, it's like, okay, you're either sad or antisocial or whatever. And there's that fear of being perceived in public without a companion, especially if it's like, you're in Paris looking at the Eiffel Tower, or there are so many different things. There's also a lot, like, to me it's very surprising, the number of people who are uncomfortable in silence, just being with themselves. And I think it's a result of having the constant input of our phones and our TVs and all these social media platforms and that sort of thing. It can be really difficult to just sit in your own thoughts. Um and so that's difficult, right? For me, I think, well, one, I was raised mostly as an only child, so there was an aspect of my life that I was used to doing things alone. I was very used to, playing alone, cooking alone, eating alone, that sort of thing. But I did have to get used to doing things outside of the house by myself. And especially especially getting a little ever so slightly off topic here, coming from a family who, like, they all like to travel, and like, you tell them about a trip and they will just add themselves to a trip without like asking. Their trips that I keep to myself until I am at the airport, on the plane, at my hotel, because I don't want five people with me. And I would get those, like, you won't even know I'm, oh, it'll be fine. That is so cute that you think I won't notice your presence. Anyway, okay. So a few things that I had to do in order to get more comfortable doing things outside of the home by myself was small solo activities. So Going to the movies alone. Going to the movies alone is great is because it's dark. Everyone's paying attention to something else. Nobody is worried about that one person sitting by themselves. Literally nobody cares. It could be something like, taking a book and reading in a park where there might be other people around, but you're by yourself. A bigger step, and one that I think a lot more people would be uncomfortable with, is going on like solo dinner dates. There is something about, well, okay, in a lot of cultures, eating is a communal activity. A lot of us were used to having like big Sunday dinners, and eating around a dinner table is a big thing. And in a lot of cultures here, but just like around the world, it's really important to have like family style dinners where everyone's sitting at the table sharing like family sized meals and that sort of thing. So I think socially and culturally, especially, eating can be a difficult thing to do alone in a public space, especially because oftentimes when we go out to eat with other people, we're talking to the person about what we're going to order. And then when we're waiting for the food, we're catching up on our day, we're talking about work, we're doing, a little yap sesh. In between bites, you're probably talking to people, in that, one person might be asking questions in between bites, and the other person is talking, and then you all switch off so that the person who was asking the questions, the person that was answering, can eat. And you know what I mean? So I think taking myself on solo dinner dates was a big thing, and getting used to like not feeling self-conscious about it. And something that I specifically had to come to terms with was, I was worried about being judged about being alone eating, because I was judging other people who were out alone eating. Like, it was not unusual for me to be out with friends eating and see someone eating alone and be like, "Huh, I wonder, hmm, what happened?" Right? Once I caught myself worrying about other people, I was like, "Oh, the only reason I care about what people think of me is because I'm worried about other people." Once I got past that, I wasn't worried about whether anyone else was judging me, because I wasn't judging anyone else anymore about why they were alone. And I also think at certain parts of my life, as I've gotten older, there were a myriad of reasons why I started doing things by myself, especially dinner dates. Sometimes I'd be celebrating a raise. Sometimes I wanted to get out the house and wanted to be by myself without friends or family and just be in my own head. There were times where I just really wanted to try a restaurant, and let's say one of my family members is allergic to seafood, and I want to go to the seafood restaurant. Well, I don't want to never eat seafood again outside of my own house because my family can't go with me, or because my friends don't like Indian food, or whatever that is, right? um and I got so tired of being held back by other people's schedules. Like, if I wanted to go out on a random Wednesday to a nice restaurant, I wanted to go out on a random Wednesday to a nice restaurant, or didn't want to be held back necessarily by someone else's financial situation. Um, and also didn't want to make them feel bad about that, right? Like, if I know one of my friends is on a budget, I don't want to be constantly asking them, "Hey, do you want to go out to eat? Do you want to do this? Do you want to do that?" when I know it's not in their budget. And at times when I have been on a tighter budget for variety of reasons, it's also just nice to not have that pressure from your friends. So it got to be more practical to do things by myself. So I would say my tips for someone who is trying to get over that hump of just getting more comfortable being by themselves is, one, start small. Like, your tolerance for being in your own head, for the solitude, should start to be built before you ever travel anywhere. So don't, well, you can if you want, but I would not recommend like, oh, I'm going to get better at being alone in Timbuktu, and when I get there it'll be fine. No, usually those types of skills are built, excuse me. Let me readjust. It's the type of quality content you guys are here for. Those types of life skills are built way before you hop on a 10-hour flight across the ocean. So start small, start familiar. Maybe you're just going to your favorite restaurant, and instead of getting takeout and taking it back home, you sit there for a while. You learn to people watch. You bring a book. You watch a movie on your phone, or like an episode of your favorite TV show, or you rewatch this YouTube video while you're eating your lunch or your dinner or whatever. Another thing I will say is people watching can be really fun. And if you learn to do it in like your local area, it's also really nice when you go places and people watching becomes a form of like learning about other people's culture, getting a lay of the land, that whole thing. And also reframe reframe the thought of like I'm alone to I am completely free of anyone else's limitations, whether it's an allergy, whether it's their ability to go somewhere, whether it's their financial situation, whether like what their preference is. You're not alone in that, oh, I don't have anyone to go with. You are allowing yourself to be free from other people's limitations. So that's the first one. Two, very reasonably, there are a lot of safety concerns around traveling solo, especially as a woman, right? I think if if you're like me, you probably watch true crime, which I've actually watched significantly less recently. um I know I grew up listening to the news all the time. Like the news was just always on in our house, and you're always hearing about the absolute worst thing that can possibly happen. For example, before I went to Morocco, the first thing I heard was, 12 years ago, they cut off some tourist heads and left them. It was like, yo, it's always the absolute, excuse me while I adjust, it's always the absolute worst possible thing that they broadcast, and they don't talk about the millions of tourists that go to Morocco every year that are just fine. Also, us as women, again, reasonably, are very specifically socialized to see a lot of things as inherently threatening, because in some ways we have to. Like it is a matter of keeping yourself safe. But when you're socialized to think of just like the people that are near you, your neighbors, the people at your local bar, when you're out at a park, make sure you have one earbud out so that you can hear if someone sneaks up behind you and there's some guy acting a little shifty. Make sure you keep your eyes on him, and that, like, be careful of other women because sometimes they're in cahoots with somebody who's going to rob you. Like, just in general, we are very, very cognizant of safety concerns. And also, when you're alone, there is generally no one to rely on if something goes wrong, right? If you're from DC and you're over in Spain, chances are if something goes wrong, there's no one that you can call that can be there in 20 minutes, right? Which elevates that fear of the worst case scenario happening, because if the worst case scenario happens, you're alone, you're by yourself. So, a few things on this one. I personally was always raised to err on the side of caution and think of the worst possible outcome for whatever my actions were, whatever my decisions were. And I had to start balancing the, okay, what's the worst thing that can happen? But also, what's the best possible scenario? And you have to balance it and meet somewhere in the middle, because chances are your trip is going to be very normal. You're not going to be in Paris the day that there's, a terrorist attack, right? You are most likely not going to be in I don't know, y'all. I don't know. The some country when there's like a huge government protest. And a huge thing here, a huge thing, and I talk about it very often on this channel, is when you do the appropriate research, it helps with that shift from it going from like a reckless decision that you're making to a calculated risk. And I am not someone who is going to ask you to, don't look up the place. Just, you want to go, just go. You should do it. Just do it. Like, absolutely not. Absolutely not. I am a risk taker, but I only take calculated risks. So I don't want you to have never left your small town in Kentucky and suddenly you decide to book a one-way trip to the middle of Laos or Nepal or Zambia or Bolivia or where, you know what I mean? We don't have to do that without looking any information up. Just, I'll figure it out when I get there. Calculate it. Calculated risk taking. And some practical tips I have on this are: one, do your research. Okay, so there's a few things you should always be looking up. One, common scams. Each area has its own flavor of scam. Um, some places it's like, the taxi drivers try to overcharge you, and that's usually what it is. It's usually money scams. The vast majority of scams around the world aren't going to be like taken where you're pulled into like trafficking, and the vast majority of scams are going to be like, okay, you're going to pay a little bit more money for something, you're going to tip somebody that really doesn't need to be tipped. I was just watching a video from a girl who went to one country, and she was like, I went to the bathroom and there was like a cleaning lady outside. She went and like wiped off the counters and then was like, money please. She's like, absolutely not. Yeah, so it'll be stuff like that. It'll be, the most common tourist attractions. There will be somebody who's like, oh, you can't get in if you're not a local, so give me $10 and I'll take you into this attraction. Or the taxis won't want to turn on the meter, so they'll end up overcharging you or something like that. The vast majority of scams aren't like dangerous. You'll just end up out of some money, but you want to do some research on those so that you know what to expect ahead of time. The other thing is local laws, because for instance, in the US, and I haven't been to every state, but I would say here, public displays of affection, at least most of them, aren't frowned upon. Like, especially if you're in like a relationship with somebody, if you walk around holding hands, it's whatever. If I guess that's one thing, but even like people will litter and yeah, you can do that. When you go to Singapore, for example, you can't spit your gum out on the ground. You will have a police officer tapping you on the shoulder. You can't spit when you feel like it. if you litter, it's a problem. And that's part of why Singapore is so nice to visit. But if you don't know that before you go and you're used to being reckless here in the States, that could be a big issue. Yeah, getting back to like public displays of affection and stuff, cultural norms. So again, here it might be perfectly normal for you to walk around holding your boyfriend's hand. In Qatar, you might not want to do that. In Morocco, even if you're married, don't go around kissing your husband and your wife. Like, you know what I mean? And then another thing that I see gets people in trouble is not researching like areas to avoid, especially if you're not a frequent or experienced traveler. Like, for example, if you're from like the sketchiest part of New York, there might be certain places that your average suburbanite wouldn't want to visit that might be okay for you, but you still want to know where those places are so that you don't get caught up in a situation that you don't want to be in. Or even if it's just uncomfortable. Like, I personally don't like being places where I feel like I gotta clutch my purse and keep things close and make sure that I don't pull out my phone because people might want to steal it. And like, you know what I mean? I don't want to do that. So resources that I use are basically all the social media platforms. Reddit is great, Instagram's great, YouTube is great, TikTok's great, and you can find some people these days. There's somebody with every life circumstance that has been the place that you want to go. If you are a single mother traveling with a 3-year-old that wants to go to Zimbabwe, there is a single mother with 3 kids who has been to Zimbabwe and is like, hey, here's what you need to know. If you are a black woman and you're like, how do they treat us in Norway? There are black people who either live there or who have traveled there who will tell you, hey, generally speaking, it's fine, but be careful when you encounter this. Or I had this experience, or I had that experience. And then a huge thing that I think so many people overlook is common sense, and just staying aware of your surroundings will take you 75% of the way to safety in just about any country in the world. It doesn't matter what cultural norms, it doesn't matter what laws, it doesn't. Just have some common sense, okay? Don't go to another country mouthing off because somebody irritated you. You know, keep your head on at least somewhat of a swivel when you're walking in unfamiliar parts of town in a new country, etc., etc. Right? And I think a question that we should be asking ourselves is not what's the worst thing that can happen, but what's the most likely thing that's going to happen, and prepare for that. So again, do some research, see what the common scams are, local laws that people don't realize are like laws that you should be following in other countries. That's probably going to be the most common thing that you're going to have to worry about. Not what if there's an earthquake in Indonesia tomorrow and I think that's a bigger thing. No matter how much preparation you do, it's not going to help. So keep your wits about you, do some research, take a calculated risk, and you will be fine. Number 3, uncertainty in unfamiliar locations. This is a big one. This is a big one. There are a lot of things that are most likely going to be different in another country that you go to visit. It could be a language barrier. It could be a transit system. Here in the US, the majority of us have never used public transit. So going to another country where you're trying to figure out a transit system can be a challenge. Of course, each culture, each country has different customs. And then for Black women, women of color, etc., etc., we also have the potential for racism and sexism in different places. And these are obviously all things that we want to keep in the forefront of our minds as we think about our travel plans. Another thing is not having backup, kind of going back to our previous point of if something goes wrong, you don't have someone that that is invested in your safety personally, a loved one who is not there to support you through making an important decision, especially if it's like a last minute thing, if there's an emergency or whatnot. And a lot of us also experience a lot of imposter syndrome. So I'm not experienced enough to handle all this change alone. I'm not brave enough to just like face something head on. There are so many, I think, aspects to imposter syndrome when it comes to traveling. I've never navigated an unfamiliar airport. I've never had to, there's just a lot. And I will say, for my first couple of solo trips, I started relatively small. Well, when I say small, I mean it was approachable in certain aspects, and I'll go through that. So my very first solo trip was actually to the Netherlands. I went to Amsterdam. I was there for 5 days, and I chose that place specifically because one, I had been there before with family, so I had some familiarity with it. Two, they're English speaking. Like the national language is Dutch, but pretty much everyone speaks English. And then I would say it's culturally similar enough to the US where it wasn't like a huge shock when I got there and was having to navigate. It's not like I dropped myself in the middle of Rwanda and was just like, like, you know what I mean? And then my second solo trip was to Seattle. There was like a specific experience that I wanted to go on, and same thing. It's here in the U.S. There, of course, there are like things that I needed to navigate, but it's very familiar, even though it's another city. And even going to, gosh, going to both places, things still went sideways. So when I got to Amsterdam, one, it took me a minute to figure out the transit system. Like I had done research, I had downloaded the app, y'all. I was ready. I was ready to hit the ground running, and for the most part, I did. But I did get on the public transportation in the wrong direction and went like 2 3 stops in the opposite direction of where I was supposed to be going. And then I got to my Airbnb finally, and my host didn't answer my calls or text messages when I got there. And I was outside for an hour, like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna have to get a last minute hotel. I got to get somewhere with some stronger Wi-Fi so that I could find y'all. It was a whole thing. And then in Seattle, I I didn't realize that I had booked it during like a film festival or something. So I had booked my car ahead of time on an app called Turo, and that host never, like, paid and everything. Never heard from him the day of. I don't know what the heck happened. Like, eventually he responded, but I had to get in touch with Turo and be like, hey, one, refund my money. Two, this guy's not answering. So I had to find a different rental car. And because of this film festival, all the cars were gone. And all the cars were gone, and most of the hotels were already booked up. I went to no fewer than 6 hotels, just going to the hotel and being like, hey, do you guys have any cancellations? I just need a place to stay. And I think I ended up staying at like a Red Roof Inn. It's like a regular hotel. It was not it was fine, but it was one of those where like I don't even think I got under the covers that night. I was so tired. It took me like 5 6 hours between figuring out that the Turo guy wasn't coming, to trying to figure out a rental car, to then getting a hotel. It was a lot of expenses out that I wasn't expecting. And also, because this was only my second solo trip. And how old was I? I was maybe 22, somewhere around there at the time. um, the hotel, or not the hotel, the Airbnb that I had booked was so cute. It was so cool. It was one of those that like you go for the experience of staying at the place. And it was in the boonies. It was like an hour and some change away from the airport, in the woods. Like I was driving just through trees. I think I saw one other car the whole drive up there. And when I finally did get there, but my parents were like, "We don't want you driving all the way out there by yourself at night. You don't know any of this." Like, right? And I didn't want to freak my parents out. So it was a whole thing. Ended up being out a lot of money until, stuff got refunded and all that. But extra expenses, it was just, it was a lot. So we got it figured out, and that's the whole point. Like, even with the best of planning, there's still going to be something that goes wrong, and we should be building the skill of like being adaptable and figuring things out, just like as a life skill. That's a general thing that all of us should know, and it's also okay. Like, everything worked out. It was annoying, it was time consuming, it was expensive, but pretty much all of it, well, except for I should have known that there was a film festival that weekend. But certain things were out of my control, and you figure it out. So a couple tips if this is you, worried about being nervous in unfamiliar locations. One, progressive exposure. So again, start somewhat familiar. Maybe your first solo travel location is a day trip to another city. Maybe, I don't know if you guys have seen, like, on Instagram or TikTok, they're probably posted here on YouTube as well, but there are people who will do like out and back trips. So, excuse me, they'll take the first flight out from DC. And what is going on? Excuse me. They'll take the first flight out at like 5 a.m. from DC down to Florida. They'll spend the day in Miami, the day in Orlando at Disney, whatever, and then take like the red eye out the same night to get back home to DC like early Sunday morning or late Saturday night, something like that. And it's literally just one day trip. If especially if you're by a major airport, there are probably low cost flights, like round trip flights that you can do that on. And you just spend a day exploring another city. Spend a day in Boston, spend a day in New York, spend a day in San Francisco, whatever. And that kind of builds the confidence, and you get used to being in areas that are a little unfamiliar, but it's not too crazy. And then also choose your first solo choose your first solo travel location strategically so that it more closely aligns with your culture, your first language, your etc., etc. And then, um, and apologies if I'm looking down. I took lots of notes. The uncertainty will be there no matter how many times you travel, no matter how many times you've solo traveled, no matter how well you plan the trip. And I would say your goal isn't to completely get rid of that uncertainty. It's to build your capacity to manage it, to handle it, to not get stressed out, and to be more calm in the moments where you get some anxiety or you have some stress with, like, how do I figure this out? I'm not in this unusual place. You want to build that rather than just trying to get rid of it. Because the reality of it is, like, I know people who have been to 60, 70 countries, and in every new country, there's still some uncertainty. There are some places where there's less of it, right? If you've been to Spain and Italy, going to Portugal isn't going to be crazy. If you've been to Mexico and Peru, going to Colombia isn't going to feel crazy. If you're used to going to West Africa and you've been to Nigeria and Ghana, going to Senegal isn't going to feel that crazy. You know what I mean? But there's always an aspect of uncertainty, and there's always an aspect of needing to adapt to the new place. So, it's not going to go away completely, but you want to build your confidence and capacity to handle it. Number 4. And this one is such a big one. And it's dealing with what other people will think of you solo traveling. So, I don't I don't it happens with men too, but there is something that's seen as very like unusual or suspicious about women traveling alone. Sometimes it doesn't happen in your home country as much as it happens in other countries, but there's like, where's your husband? Wow, you're traveling without, I think specifically a man for some reason. Like they never ask you about your friends. They always ask you about where your man is. Even other women, not even like other men who are like trying to flirt with you, just in general. Where's your huh? By yourself, huh? Yep. It's amazing. I've lived my life alone this whole time. um And then there are a lot of people who, out of like love and concern, like people who love you, your friends and your family will project their own fears and their own judgment of almost like me being concerned about other people judging me while I was out eating, and I didn't realize for a while that it was me judging other people, and that's why I was worried about it. Friends and family will also do the same thing. Like they're too scared to do it. So therefore you should also be too scared to do it. Or if I were to go to this other place, I would be thinking XYZ. So therefore you must be thinking XYZ. Like it's a whole thing. And then there's also the I got so many of they're like, well, what are you running from? Or I see it on social media all the time. The sugar daddy must have paid this week. Excuse me? Like there's gotta be some man, whether it's your father, some random man you met on the internet, a sugar daddy, whatever, what have you, that's got to be funding this. So, because it is impossible for you as a woman to have saved her coins to get on a flight, to pay for a hotel on your own, and to now be enjoying your life in whatever city, country. I, yeah. Anyway, there are people who will assume that, like, like I said, sugar daddy. We got to see the sugar daddy. He must be 60 years old, must be 80 years old, on his deathbed. What are you doing for him? Like you have to be reciprocating this mysterious man's payments for your trips in questionable ways, or you must be running from your life. Oh my gosh, how bad is it at home where you feel like you have to gallivant off to France and to Barcelona? What's going on? Or like you must be traveling alone to avoid some kind of accountability. I know I've definitely gotten that before. Like, oh, you just want to go that way you can do whatever you want without anybody watching you. What kind of stuff must you be doing alone where you feel like you don't want anyone seeing what you're doing? And it's like, we'll get there. And then there are also the people who will assume that like you're a social outcast or you're antisocial, like, oh my gosh. Or they feel pity because you don't have friends or family or a partner to go to these places with you. I also think the one that's funny is people just assuming that you must hate people in general. Like, oh, like I said, antisocial. She must just hate being around people for her to want to go to insert name of city country by herself. And here's the thing, you know what your intentions are, you know what your plan is, and that's enough. Like at the end of the day, that's all you need. People will, and this is what I had to and this is what I had to come to the conclusion of. People are going to have assumptions either way. Whether you were going, let's just say that I did have a sugar daddy that was paying for me to be in Spain this weekend. People are going to have assumptions, right? Whatever it is. And for the record, I have never had anyone else fund one of my trips, but people are going to assume things either way. I may as well do what I want to do, because regardless, you're going to think something negative. Like, those people who have those assumptions are going to have negative thoughts about your trips, about your intentions behind your trips, about what your plans are, about whether or not you're going to meet a man, whether, like, they're going to have their assumptions. I may as well do what I want because you're going to assume anyway. And lastly, on this point, I think it's really important to, according to your own desires, to make sure that you're fully showing up for the people that you care about when you're at home. That way, the people that you care about, the people that matter, know that it's not a she hates everyone, she doesn't have any friends, she hates her family, whatever narrative. It's hard to sustain when you come home, you're still going out to dinner with your friends, you're still making time for family game nights, when you're back home, that you're still, all of the above. So, couple different ways to handle those assumptions that other people will have, other people's thoughts. And lastly, and I think this one in some ways is the most important, it's the I'm not the type of person to solo travel. And I don't know whether it's like movies or the books or even, a lot of your favorite bloggers and vloggers, when you look at them, it can be easy to build this character, this archetype of what a solo traveler is. It's like, oh, they must be so extroverted and they always live their life so boldly without caring about what somebody thinks. And it's only super experienced travelers that solo travel. And then there's also like the cultural and family expectations. There are a lot of families and cultures that are very collectivist. Like, it's all of us. If somebody's going on a trip, we're all going on a trip. I mentioned that in the beginning. Like, my family is a family of travelers, which is a huge blessing. But also, there are times when I want to be somewhere on my own. And I can't tell y'all when I'm going somewhere until I arrive in the Timbuktu airport. Because I don't want this to be a 9-person trip when I just want to go enjoy the beach. When I just want to sip a cocktail at my resort without the whole family. You know? Um yeah, so there's that. And then there are also, we have this archetype, but then if you feel like you're the opposite of any of those things, if you're introverted, if you're someone who comes from maybe a smaller town, if you don't have a lot of travel experience, it can feel very, very disqualifying. And I would like to challenge that by saying that the type of person who solo travels is really just the type of person who's brave enough to solo travel. Like a solo traveler is someone who travels solo. It's not certain personality traits. It's not sure there might be some that are more common, but again, if you look at uh all the social media like I was talking about doing research, there are plenty of introverted solo travelers. There are plenty of travelers who are like, yo, I'm from the backwoods of wherever and I decided to take the leap. And yeah, there's nothing in your background or your personality or your culture that really disqualifies you unless you allow it to. Okay, so you're an anxious person. I am also anxious, but I would rather be anxious in Barcelona. I would rather. I'm so insufferable. I say that in the age of social media, you can find someone who has the potentially disqualifying trait that is doing the things that you want to do, and it's important to use those people as resources in order to help yourself build the confidence and kind of get out of that mindset. And then calling back to our first point, getting more comfortable in our everyday life is how you become the type of person that solo travels. So, if you're feeling unready, if you're like, I'm not that brave, I'm not that bold yet, Alexis, I hear you, but I don't feel you. That's okay. That's okay. There are small things that you can do. Try a new hobby. If you're someone who is really big into, the quieter solo hobbies, maybe you're a reader, maybe you're a knitter, maybe you're a puzzler, whatever. Try archery. Try uh I don't know. There are subreddits for that too, for finding new hobbies. But try something maybe that puts you out in front of other people. Maybe you want to go to a trivia night. Even if you don't participate, maybe you want to learn how to play an instrument. Whatever it is, like there are smaller ways to build a little bit of confidence. Again, take those day trips. Even if you don't take a flight, for most of us, there's another city that's an hour or two away that we can drive to just explore. It's those little acts of independence that stack up over time and allow you to kind of reshape your identity in a way that will make you feel more confident, more comfortable, identifying yourself as like somebody who can solo travel. It's cumulative. It all adds up. And just because you don't feel like you're that person today doesn't mean you can't become that person that you feel comfortable doing bigger things. So, lastly, again, if you are the type of person that is on the fence, that is okay. You don't have to be convinced by one YouTube video by a random internet stranger that has never showed up on your feed before. But I have shared some practical tips. I've shared my own personal stories, and I encourage you to go down the rabbit hole a little bit more. If this is something that you want to do for yourself, go down the rabbit hole. There are so many amazing YouTubers who are Black, who are Asian, who are, women in their 40s, 50s, 60s traveling the world solo. There are single moms, there are families, any circumstance. Obviously, this is specifically solo travel, but whatever your circumstance is, there is someone who is doing it and has forged a path forward, and you can take advantage of the fact that they were brave enough to do it before you, or they had the opportunity to do it before you. um yeah, and I want everyone to walk away from this video feeling like even if you're not comfortable now, the only thing between you and your first solo travel trip is really the decision to go. Obviously with an asterisk, there are life things that might restrict us, but if it's a matter of making the decision, of building the confidence, building the boldness, feeling the audacity, because in some of our cultures it's audacious to want to do something like that for yourself, by yourself, without the accountability, without being limited by other people. It's like it's crazy. Yeah. So hopefully that was helpful to someone. If you're still here, thank you for joining us on this ride. If you're someone who has solo traveled, I'm so interested to see, maybe what your limiting belief was and how you got over it. Maybe what your favorite or your first solo travel destination was. And if you're someone who is still on the fence and could use a little encouragement, comment that too. What's the biggest thing that is currently holding you back from doing a solo trip? What's the mindset? What's the cultural norm, etc., etc.? And yeah, where would you like to go? Ideally, once you decide to plan your first solo trip, where would you like to go? Let's talk about it in the comments. I want to talk to some of y'all. All right. If you don't know, my name is Alexis. I post here on YouTube every single day. Today is day 32. My goal is at minimum 100 days, so feel free to hop on this train early. And yeah, subscribe. We have fun around here. It's cozy. You're welcome as long as you treat this house like it's yours. Okay, don't be in the comments disrespectful. And yeah, I will see y'all tomorrow. Bye.